G'day everyone, welcome back. Grandma's Handbag, top 100, ultimate time. We got to get straight into this. I've kept everyone waiting. I've put my life, everything on hold for too long for all of this. Here's the helper. I'm pulling out, hopefully you can see this, all stops here. We've got a 40-year-old single malt Glenfarclas at 46%. Thought I'd go with something special because just like that whiskey, this list has been 40 years in the making. It's a stock take, a point of where I'm at, what these records have been in my life, and we're down to the nuts and bolts of it. Anyway, cheers to you all. Beautiful, beautiful whiskey. Barley sugar. Lemon sherbet with this salty tang, and then it's got this kind of somewhere between a cognac and a sherry. Oh, delicious stuff. The finish goes on forever. Beautiful, beautiful whiskey. Rambling already. Top 10. Let's just get into it, shall we? Number 10, Wish You Were Here, Pink Floyd, 1975. Now, it's a perverse thing for me to delight in the moment where it all goes wrong for the Floyd. But when the result's an album this eloquent and this emotive, the difficult birth of this album, born from the fact that they had nothing left to prove basically after Dark Side, meant somehow they dug deeper than they ever had on this album. It's Pink Floyd at their best for me. It's all four contributing truly equally for the last time, and this time they're beyond thought and into pure expression. Mason's drumming, I love it. Equal parts oceanic space and then alternately filling it. Gilmour is effortless like water. Water's lyrics, poetic, not didactic, right on the money. And look, to me, it's Rick Wright's zenith though. The evolution in his playing on here, the subtle ways that he beds and embellishes Shine On are just stunning for me. And it's all about Shine On for me, every single moment of it. But you can't ignore the cold Battersea Victorian horror of Welcome to the Machine, and the flipside riposte as well, that churning dystopic funk of Have a Cigar with Roy Harper's delivery, just dripping sarcasm perfectly. And the title track is iconic, a radio staple that I'll always drop anything to have a listen to. Look, Pink Floyd may not be my be-all and end-all anymore, like they might have been 20 years ago, but I'm so glad they were my gateway. Number 10, just thought I'd show, this is a quad press, one of the most beautiful albums that I've got in my collection to listen to, just a stunning piece. And I'll leave you with a little ghostly segment that finishes after Welcome to the Machine, just a beautiful reprise or redux of Shine On. Beautiful stuff. Hunky Dory, number 9, 1971, David Bowie. One of those change your life albums for me. I was initiated into this one by Rebecca, who ran the music department in my first year at work in 1997. She used to blast a hell of a lot of Jane's Addiction and Lard and Hunky Dory. Could do without the other two, but I fell hard for this one and played it pretty much nearly weekly for the next 5 or 6 years even, I swear, at work. It plays seamlessly for me from start to finish, like any top album should. And, you know, I couldn't even pick a low light or a highlight. All songs are superb here, but just secretly, Quicksand has always been an amazing secret fave of mine. I can't help but mention Rick Wakeman's lyrical piano just lifts this whole thing. Likewise, Rono and the Spiders, just serve the songs so tastefully on here, and they keep Bowie front and centre. This album set off an almost unparalleled run of brilliant albums for the next 10 years for Bowie, and it had everyone playing catch-up. It's also the most human that the Starman would feel over this incredible decade as well. Hunky Dory as an album was this, like a brief character for Bowie, another one, that of the classic singer-songwriter, the fan who dares to dream. It's got this cinematic bent to it to me. It almost plays out like a movie, you know. You got side one, Bowie learning to stretch his wings into the characters and things that he would flesh out later on in his career, while side two was an out-and-out tribute to his heroes and a signpost for me as a youngster for a lot of artists to explore. You know, and while other Bowie characters might have had a greater pull, this one has the flash of brilliance and the songs that blinded me and started a Bowie obsession. And as for life-changing, I should tell you this quick story of mine. I met a friend going to university from high school one day, and on the way we passed in through a thrift store. We're digging around, and I pulled one of these out of the bin. Would have been a couple of dollars. We're talking 99 or 1999 or so. Pulled it out and asked my friend, Gary, have you heard this? And I said, he goes, no, man. He goes, I said, it's yours. It'll change your life. And no word of a lie, within 10 minutes he had this under his arm walking along, and the classic Bowie Ronson picture happened when this girl fell to her knees in front of him and just started worshipping Bowie. And I just said to him, told you it'd change your life. And he had a massive grin on his face. Couldn't disagree with me. Alright, number 8, Rolling Stones, Exile on Main Street. We're getting into the heavy hitters. This album is all about feel for me. I can't explain quite how, but it just feels like coming home, like familiar, like a favourite pair of slippers, you know. Slip it on the turntable, slip right into the zone. Yeah, it feels torn and frayed. It's a home for burnout broken souls. It's ragged, it's joyous, it's sinful and redemptive in equal measure on here. It drips with mood. It's got that sort of murky sound that nails it to that time and place, you know, that basement in Nelcote. At 18 tracks long, it's just full of deep cuts, but again, absolutely seamless on here. This unshowy, if that's even a word, parade of a band effortlessly flexing their muscle on here. The piano from Nicky and Ian, fantastic stuff. Mick Taylor, absolutely on song here, as are the Glimmer Twins as well. And then Charlie's drums for me are just so perfectly loush. Just love them. Bobby Keys and the brass that comes in after every second verse just delivers like the fucking mailman. That's all I gotta say. I can never get enough of the gospel feel that crops up on this album, you know, or Keith's singing and his nodding riff on Happy just does it for me. It's the sound of the Stones, you know, going back to an us against the world outlook of 10 years earlier. You know, just that little bit older and so much wiser. A small unit doing what they know best. Rock and roll, par excellence. You know, every groove on this album to me is suffused with it. There's no higher praise I could give it than this. If there's a heaven, then the Stones would be my bar band playing this album. Number 7, Noi, 75 from 75. I never fail to immerse myself and strap in for the ride when I put this one on. It hits so many personal notes to me on what makes up a great album. It's ghostly, tantalizing, incredibly evocative, you know. There's anger, bitterness, hope, acceptance, resignation. You know, it's not so much a blank slate as a vast mirror, you know, reflecting things seen and unseen when you peer in deep enough. It's beautifully, to me, embodies Weltschmerz, this subtle yet pervasive background hum I feel through a lot of my life. So, as to the album, against this increasing indifference and a fracturing relationship, Rother and Dinger dig in here for a third and final shot and call upon the essence of the band. You know, that gorgeous texture and melody set to endless motoric motion. It's the quiet nihilism of a band for me that's falling apart. The beauty, the oceanic contemplation of Rother's work on side 1 versus the proto-punk rage and slashing noise of Dinger on side 2. And that split, incredibly influential stuff as well. Side 1 there had David Bowie wanting to work with him and influencing the Berlin trilogy. Side 2, a clear influence on Steve Jones and Johnny Rotten. It's this baton between 60s German rock's flowering and the punk and new wave to come. And given the split sides and the solo directions of Rother and Dinger that followed, the band could only split after this album anyway. But for me, the towering statement of the band and the flawless distillate of that incredibly fertile 60s German rock explosion. Neu. Alright, number 6. Bob Dylan, Highway 61 Revisited, 65. This is a late 60s Australian press on the CBS label. Anyway, so you know it all. From that snare that's so perfectly described by Bruce Springsteen as kicking a door open to your mind, all the way down to Desolation Row. This is a white knuckle ride of an album. It's got this, to me, I've always felt this off-key quality to it that kind of feels like a blurred photo taken at speed from a Buick 6, kind of like how the Blonde on Blonde album cover just looks. It sounds to me like history is evolving at warp speed to your eyes, and it looks that way as well. And that's almost how Dylan writes here for me, freeing characters from his art and history books and from time altogether and allowing them to basically dance together in eternity while he shoots you through on an electric blues kick drawn straight from those highways connecting rural America to the furnace heat of Chicago, of Detroit, of youth, of 60s America. There's so much for me to love on Highway 61. The words, my God, they're vitriolic, audacious, poetic, dense, thrilling, so much more. The music, that inspired Paul Griffin, Al Cooper organ piano combo, Mike Bloomfield's stinging licks on here, the harp blasts from Dylan that speak this harsh truth to them. And then by using the blues as a way of jumping from folk to rock, Dylan starts to hit on this Americana music kind of that makes the past integral to the future on here. I could go on and countless others already have done so, but Highway 61 feels for me like this knife edge in time, the locus of the first half of the 60s and the nexus for the next half. A true zeitgeist, electric, eternal Dylan. Alright, getting down to it. Top half now. Number 5. This is no surprise to long-time viewers. Spiritualized with Ladies and Gentlemen, We Are Floating in Space from 97. The newest entry on here. I'm just going to spoil that for you. This to me is a logical extension of everything Spaceman 3 birthed. It incorporates so many influences on here. Modern classical, drone blues, free jazz, gospel, and they're all welded to this two-chord Stooges space blues chassis, or space rock chassis, I should say. But these musical influences combine with lyrics revolving around love, loss, and medication on here. We'll get back to that. And by sheer force of will, this morass somehow coalesces into Jay Spaceman's defining art statement on this album. And that statement he's got is minimalism as maximalism, in sound and in feeling. He reduces ideas to this essence and then they're exploded to their limit. So from the weightless opening title track to the malcontent Vortex Voodoo closer of Cop Shoot Cop, it streaks heavenward from Pachelbel to Laurie Anderson via Elvis Presley, Dr. John, string quartets, gospel choirs. It aims high, it digs real deep, and it hits every note in between. Beyond the music though, the album's flow on this is integral. There's noise segments that knit this whole thing together and deliver the experience. The mix is dense, furious stuff. It took 9 months just to mix the album. And not to mention the Mark Farrow design concept here just wraps all this music up perfectly. It's medicine for the soul. And just to go on with that, this is my original CD copy, where they really get to nail out the thing perfectly. So you've got your pill box with your pill, and you've got your medical prescription in there, and it's just some of the greatest design working with music I've seen as well. Anyway, this album, it's been healing me now for 20 years, and it's an album that continues to soundtrack the big moments in my life, most recently my wedding a few years ago, and it refuses to lose its power or its potency to me, and it digs in where others fall away. So that's why it's at number 5. Alright, number 4, Nick Drake, Pink Moon from 1972. Now, more than just about any other artist, Nick Drake has captivated me. I can still remember finding this set from which this covers from a day after reading about Nick Drake in Mojo's February 97 article. I've never ever felt destined to find a record before or since, but that day something told me I'd find this album or this box set, and it was life-changing as well. I'm just going to sprinkle up some photos I took of Nick's home and his gravestone when I visited in 2001. So this album for me is pretty much the epitome of how an album should be made. It's perfect to me and not a single note wasted. 2 nights, 1 man playing, 1 recording, voice, guitar, 1 piano overdub, 11 tracks, 28 minutes. So it's painfully spare. It's as though there's an essence here, an undilute, undeniable truth that Nick Drake was trying, or even compelled to leave us all with. Nick's typically warm clustered chords are shot through here with stark single string lines, you know, those wistful lyrics of yore, now foreboding. Nick's voice is harrowed, keening and breaking just a little here and there too. Yet his finger picking is precise. It's like a heartbeat, constant, you know. But for all of that as well, the melodies on here are just immaculate, subtle, intricate, lived in and laboured over. You know, you can almost feel Drake being hollowed out in getting this album out on tape for us. It hurts too much for me to listen to often. You know, I sometimes feel a bit like a voyeur listening to this, and as though loving this album is kind of like enjoying Nick's pain. But look, after these 11 tracks, I don't need anything more from Nick. It plays to me as his last will and testament from a man who notoriously had a skin too few. You know, it's impossibly beautiful to me. Number 4, Pink Moon. Number 3, Velvet Underground and Nico, 1967, self-titled. This album, perfect collision of noise and pop, art and rock. Classical music ideas bristle against the gutter-diving rock and Dylan-esque narratives Lou Reed brings. It thumps, it throbs, it hums with these hidden harmonics in there. It sneers, it struts, it's soft, it's sexy. You know, it's blemished, gritty recording, but that only ever adds to its freshness and appeal to me. It's more about the idea on this album than the feeling than the execution of it. You know, there's a danger, a nihilism that's inherent on here, that punk attitude that somehow this album, this music doesn't care if you like it or not. You know, for the pounding swagger of Waiting for My Man or Run, 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 those atonal drones on Venus in Furs or Black Angel's Death Song. You also get the timeless tenderness of I'll Be Your Mirror, you know, the paranoid lullaby of Sunday Morning. Just the range is astonishing. Nico's vocals on here are perfect. No more, no less. Just perfect. Oh, and Heroin. The tension and resolution of those two guitar chords that just have this tidal push and pull with the drums in here. The hovering viola drone on here is just still some of the most primal rock and roll on record. This album eternally brims with the visceral, redemptive power of rock and roll, and it just never fails to move me, you know. The power of the banana has not waned on me in 20 years now, and this is my rock and roll Rosetta Stone, Velvet Underground. Alright, top two. I might go a tiny bit longer on these two, so bear with me, folks. Alright, number two. Okay, I grew up with the Beatles. They're my favourite band, okay? So going to high school, I had a friend, hey Ash, who loved them just as much as me. And we'd play their albums on a tape Walkman, you know, sharing an earbud on the train, which is probably why I like the mono versions more than the stereo these days. And then we'd dissect all the songs and theorise. This was about the time Anthology came out too. So the Beatles were probably the reason I became a collector of music. And while my dad had played Please Please Me, Rubber Soul, you know, Sgt. Pepper's, Abbey Road, White Album, and I love them all, Revolver felt like my discovery. You know, I'd heard half of these songs in isolation, but here in their own contained world, they sounded weird, druggy, impossibly cool. Klaus Voormann's cover art here evolves the Beatles from the skewed looks of that Rubber Soul cover right into the centres of their minds here, peering out their heads. The title playing on the idea that this disc is just another, you know, product demanding your money and your attention. The music, all surface sheen, you know, this sleek 60s invention designed with economy and impact in mind. So to me, Revolve is this ultimate 60s pop product. The sound of four minds spinning out in perfect sync, you know. You got Jeff Emerick and George Martin delivering the studio to the Beatles as an instrument here, and the result is just transformative, you know. Looping here liberates the band from working and allows them to create, you know. It delivers economy in these songs. 14 songs, 2.5 minutes. Every single song could be a jukebox A or B side, you know. The first 4 songs here are just a stunning display of their range, you know. Each song sounds like it could launch a career for another band. Taxman, the killer intro, you know, that music concrete lyric loop still hypes me up every time. McCartney's solo is a killer. I was almost destroyed when I found out it wasn't Harrison's solo. McCartney's bass on the album, just, it's off the hook good stuff here. Love Ringo's drumming on here. On I'm Only Sleeping, Ringo constructs this beat like God's own carpenter, you know, this delicious swing that just softened by cymbals that somehow seem to sigh. Incredible stuff. Too many more highlights on here to mention, but you know, not a dud track. And for those people that say Yellow Submarine, only the Beatles could get their lysergic absurdism to number 1. The compressed backwards whirl of electric guitar start to rival the drone and twang of sitars that crop up on here. And that, to me, further proof that this album is sort of firmly aimed for the mind's eye and the spirit, more than any other album of theirs to date as well. And Exhibit A, Tomorrow Never Knows, you know, still sounds to me like witnessing a supernova. Just a phenomenal song. It's as though the Beatles almost transcend pop itself here on Revolver. So this album is there right at this genesis of the rock album as the preeminent artistic and commercial medium, you know. It's that important. It's the Beatles at their zenith as the zeitgeist. Pop perfection and rock evolution. It's Revolver, number 2. Okay, number one. Okay, if I could give a drum roll or a wah, 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 I'd do that. How about if I just go and say, if I ventured in the slipstream, would you know that it's Van Morrison's Astral Weeks at number one? This has been a decade-long dawning that this album for me might just be my all-time favourite. It's every single thing I think and feel an album should be. It speaks of the moment of creation, but it rings eternal. You know, the way it's made, I just love how Van almost scrapes away at his guitar, sketches out this map which bassist Richard Davis masterfully picks up and pivots off of, you know, which suddenly allows Connie Kay and Jay Berliner to dive in and wheel around, you know, Warren Smith to bed down with vibes, and yet somehow all this centers Van's voice to give flight all the way over the top. And then you've got those flutes and strings and brass that spark off of that. The overdubs, strings and brass mesh and integrate for me seamlessly on here. And strangely, I feel like they almost ground the improv that's going on this album. Those strings especially just feel like autumn shade to me. Equal parts light and shiver, you know, just right. It's this template they lay down that plays out over pretty much every song here. That moment of creation, the freshness and possibility of improvisation, of feel over perfection on here. The lyrics here are doused in memory, you know, so it's less about what Van sings and how he sings it. And again, it's just about how it feels. And this is, to me, is the crux, the crucial point of this album. This is where Van taps into something deep and utterly essential to me. His vocals become this conduit between the earth and stars. He's wrapping up everything that ever touched him musically, emotionally, spiritually, into each evolving moment in the song. If this sounds like I'm over-egging it, I've waited a long time to say this. Each vocal line he does, each utterance, each repetition, something he's trying to capture over and over, this immutable essence of what it is to be, to live, to love, to yearn, you know. All those feelings that transcend the binds of time and space, that connect our past selves with every evolving future self, all living and dying in that one moment of being. That's what I hear in Van's voice. This album feels to me, you know, it's as close as I might ever get to touching the infinite. It stuns me repeatedly with its beauty, hits me on some molecular level, I don't know, and rarely fails to draw a tear when I listen to it. It's quite embarrassing, I have to say, in public especially. But look, as he says on here, to be born again. If listening to an album can make the familiar feel new, you know, can once again imbue the world with magic every single time you listen, isn't that worthy of being number one? It is in my books. Van Morrison, number one, Astral Weeks. Cheers, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming on this journey. This has been a long, drawn-out process, and every single comment, I've just so humbled, so grateful. You know, this feels a bit like a musical stock take, and I know that Mike Tomlin will keep me to account on this, but I'm wiping the slate clean. These are the albums that have made up my life to date. The albums that I think are truly essential. And hopefully they're the launching pad to new things ahead, which is where all you guys come in. So let me know what you think of these albums. Let me know where you think I've missed out and where I need to go visit next. And if I have a reason for why they didn't make it, I'm sorry in advance as well for any albums. But take care, everyone. I really mean that. Thank you so much. This has been far and away the best thing I've involved in, as drawn out as it might be, for programming on my channel. So to you all, I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you all. Cheers. Bye-bye.